Blackout. What's up, everybody? It's Bear with BearIndependent.com, the Oso Independiente, the leader of Bear Nation. Today we're going to talk about blackout. What do? You got two choices. You could die or you could live. We're going to go with live. The grid is very easily impacted by infinitesimal issues, a downed limb, an overloaded system, etc. It is highly probable that your area will be affected by a power outage at some point in time. Here is how to prepare to weather the temporary loss of electricity. Get to know both your neighbors and your local area before electricity stops flowing. Have a plan in place to transport the vulnerable if necessary. It may be excessively hot or cold for prolonged periods of time. Extreme temperatures may negatively impact the elderly and the newborn especially. Bye, honey. I love you. Items to have on hand. At least 2 weeks worth of food, weeks worth the bed cut. Take a break, everybody. Okay, go. At least 2 weeks worth of food, non-perishable. Water, at least 1 gallon per person per day. Much prefer 3 gallons per person per day based upon our experiences deploying to areas actually affected by blackout. Storm remediation, disaster remediation. 3 gallons a day is better than 1 gallon a day. But 1 gallon a day is a place to start. And other necessities to include diapers, soap, etc. Stores may be closed. Stores may not have electricity, just like you. Makes it very hard to negotiate a point of sale interaction. 1 to 2 weeks worth of gasoline in case you need to leave the area or transport a vulnerable person out of the area. Fuel pumps may be unavailable because they run on electricity. Please note that gasoline only lasts about 3 to 6 months when stored and 2 to 3 months if an ethanol blend is used. Keep the supply on rotation as needed. You should have alternative fuel, heating and cooling equipment, and an alternative energy source. An example of this is a 40-pound tank of propane, an indoor safe heater, and a mobile solar panel cell phone charger, or whatever floats your boat. You could be completely off-grid. You can have a mini wind turbine. You could have one of them fan thingies that people throw into their creek that creates minute amounts of hydroelectricity, whatever floats your boat. But you should have a way to stay warm, ideally a way to stay cool, a way to prepare your food, and a way to recharge your small electronics that may become necessary. Phone being a primary one, ham radio being another. Good quality flashlights, either charged or with fresh batteries on hand, depending on the type. A battery-operated and/or hand-crank radio available for access to critical information. We have both the NOAA emergency hand crank radios, which frankly I don't love, but they're better than nothing, and ham radios that are pre-programmed to catch all of our weather stations and all of our emergency stations in our area. A first aid kit, including necessary medications if applicable, especially if you are dependent upon meds. You should have a backstock of that medication. Your local pharmacy may be out of power. Blackout for a period of time as well, so you want to go deep on your prescription meds if you can. And a lot of times people say, well, even if I could afford that, Bear, I can't get that. Ask your doctor. Ask your doctor. You would be amazed how much having a simple conversation helps that situation. Just say, listen, I'm concerned about a potential blackout. Is there anything I can do to just get like an extra 30-day supply? And if it's something benign like blood pressure medication, they're not going to care, generally speaking. If it's controlled substances, narcotics, they're probably going to care. But at least have that conversation. You should have extra cash on hand. ATMs and card readers are not your friends in a grid down scenario. When the power dies, by the way, when, not if, but when the power dies, first check to see how widespread the issue is. If it is only your home that's affected, it's time to check your circuit breakers, your main load center, and start troubleshooting and begin the repair process. If your neighbors are also out of power, contact the electricity provider to get an idea of the nature of the problem and how long the outage may last. Pass this information to your neighbors. Now, hopefully you wrote all of that down in your prepper notebook. If you didn't, you might want to get one of these, the Prepper Classroom Notebook from bearindependent.com. You might also want to go back into the Prepper Classroom series here on YouTube, available for free forever here on YouTube, the Prepper Classroom playlist. I also have a video called Prepping for EMP, the worst SHTF scenario, and I would suggest, if you found this to be helpful, that you go watch that as well. It is called Prepping for EMP, the worst SHTF scenario. I have been fortunate that I have spent a large chunk of my life working on the national electrical grid. A grid down scenario, a blackout, is the #1 disruptive threat that we as Americans will face. Disruptive threat. There are regular threats, irregular threats, disruptive threats, and environmental threats. The grid going down is the #1 disruptive threat because fuel will not flow. Supply chain logistics will get messed up. Heating, ventilation, air conditioning, as well as refrigeration will not work. Communications suffer. Medical. There's huge issues with medical treatment. Hospitals, first responders, these 24-hour mini ERs, all these things do not work. Law enforcement, oftentimes because of a lack of communications, is forced to stay in place and not go respond to issues. Fire and EMS have the same issues. It's the #1 disruptive threat to the American way of life. Our life is predicated upon the successful flow of electrons. And so I would encourage you to do an audit of how you live and figure out ways to either replace the electrons from the grid that you're currently using, and or have ways that you can accomplish the same things without the flow of electrons. Meaning that either you have off-grid redundancy of power production over here, or mechanical capability over here that's not grid dependent. Blackout. What do? You live because you're prepared. If you'd like to support the show, you can click the little baby bear up here that'll take you to Patreon. Shout out to the patrons. We love y'all. You're the best. You are the economic engine of the Bear Nation. If you found this useful, please share this out with other people who need to see it. We appreciate y'all greatly. Shalom.